to our Moving Forward series, and today I'm here with Julia, and we're going to be talking about anxiety, and she's going to be sharing kind of her heart with us. So Julia, thank you. So why don't we start with kind of just telling us a little bit about you.
All right, so I'm Julia. I am married. I've been married for 19 years. I have two wonderful children, Daniela, 21, and Oliver, who is 14. My husband and I have a ministry together, so we have been in ministry for about 10 years now, and our children are with us there.
So I guess to share with our people watching that we're not in North Carolina, so we want to say where we're at.
We are in sunny Florida, even though today's not a sunny day, but we're in sunny Florida. Been here pretty much all my life in Florida.
Yeah, so Julia and I worked together, so I had the opportunity to kind of ask her to share her heart with us. So excited for that today. So, the topic of anxiety, so I know for me, it's not something that I have experienced, really anybody in my family has experienced. So why don't we start with just kind of explaining to us what that looks like, maybe to somebody from the outside, and then what does that feel like for you on the inside?
I think for people in the outside, they just don't understand, because you don't understand until you've gone through it. Because it's not, I think that so many things have come out now with mental illness and depression and anxiety, and we could talk more about it right now. But because my husband struggled with it when we first met. He didn't understand what it was. He's like, what is anxiety? What do you mean that you're worried? What are you worried about? There's nothing to worry about, right? Because a lot of it is worried. It's you're fearful for what could happen, but it hasn't happened, and it may not happen, right? That's what I felt. For him, he didn't understand. What do you mean? Nothing has happened. There's nothing wrong. So that's kind of the difference, right? For somebody that experiences, and it's that constant, because anxiety can be many things. For me, it was a constant worrying, right? It was, you wake up worried, you spend your day worried, but you have to function, and then you go to sleep worried. And then you wake up the next day and it's that constant worriness that I felt. So you learn, unfortunately, for a lot of people, you just learn to live with it and hide it. And when you do that, it gets worse, right?
So were there certain things that you would worry about? Like, are there certain things, or is it everything?
Well, we have to talk about how it happened, right? So my father passed away very tragically a week before my wedding, so Saturday before my wedding, and that triggered PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. And I worried about dying. I worried about my family members dying. I worried about my mom dying, my sisters, right? So anybody that was close to me. And I was constantly worrying about that, constantly worrying about having heart condition because my father died of a heart attack. Or my mom having heart condition, or my sister, and that escalated. So, and it's not only the anxiety, because if you don't treat the anxiety, then I started having panic attacks, right? And I remember that I would time Lewis, like he would leave to work, and I knew that he had to be there. Like it would take him 30 minutes to get there. In 30 minutes, if he didn't call me or he didn't answer the phone, I thought he had killed himself in a car accident. It is the worst thing that you live through,
right?
Because you're always expecting the worst news,
always kind of overthinking it and analyzing
and expecting the worst, expecting the worst, and then that started happening with everything, not going to the doctor because you think they're going to give you the worst news, and it starts building up and gets worse as time progresses, and then from that was anxiety. Then I went into panic attacks, and then I started having extreme fears or phobias, as well, for 12 years.
And that's what I was going to say. So how long, your dad had passed, how long were you dealing with that anxiety?
12 years.
12 years.
It was 12 years, and you couldn't talk a lot about it because every time you would tell someone that I have anxiety, you're crazy. Right. I'm not crazy. I can function perfectly fine. One thing has nothing to do with the other. So you suppress it. You keep it inside. You deal with it, right? You hide from people. You avoid certain things. Then you start avoiding certain situations that may trigger it. For me, being in closed places will trigger the anxiety. Like if I went to restaurants that were too packed or too many people, it would trigger the anxiety. If it was too far away from home, it would trigger the anxiety because I couldn't control my environment, right? Because it's a lot about you controlling. You're really not in control, and of course I learned that afterwards. But you have to feel that you're in control. But I dealt with it for 12 years, and I tried every single medication, and I tried psychologists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists, and nothing worked.
So did you feel in that 12 years that you were kind of stuck?
Completely. When it came to even stuck in relationships, stuck even at work for work, like growing, because I was afraid of making changes. Like you're afraid of changes, right? You get stuck in your relationships too, because my husband didn't understand that. He's like, are you just trying to control me? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. So you do, and then you start just keep it in because you don't want it to affect other people or it to affect relationships with other people. It's not only the anxiety, it's dealing with it and trying to hide it and cover it.
So did you share it? Like you mentioned you shared it with your husband. Were there other people that you shared it with, or did you kind of keep it close?
I shared it with, people that I shared it with the most were my doctor. So my primary care, who's been my doctor for a very long time, my cousin, who's a psychiatrist, who helped me through a lot of it. At some point with, my mom as well. With my mom, it was later on because she was dealing with my dad passing, right? And she was dealing with her own stuff. But I couldn't talk about it at work like I do now, right? Like now we can talk about it and we're okay because people label you, right? So I would not talk about it outside my personal circle.
And I think that's interesting that you say, you weren't able to share that with your mom because, she was grieving, Similar for me, like when my dad passed, there was a lot of things that, even though they are the parent and you're the child, you think, okay, I can't share this. I want to protect them. So that has to be hard.
It's really hard because you know that they're suffering. My parents were married for 36 years. And my dad died suddenly. It's not like he was sick and we were at the hospital and you knew he was going to pass away. I mean, my mom left to the doctor that morning and my dad went to work and never came back, So it was really hard. And
so I guess that could be your fear, right? You just said it, like your dad left and didn't come back,
and
that was your fear.
So I saw my dad, and the next time I saw my dad was in funeral home. Right. So it was a very traumatic experience for me. I still deal with it at times, but I
know there's certain things that kind of still affect you more than others with that. Yeah,
it does. And the COVID situation triggered a lot of my anxiety. I've been very good for a long time. Again, it's that losing control, right? It's like, what if? What if I get sick? What if my kids get sick? What if my mom gets sick? And then there's things that trigger, even with Oliver, right? With his allergies. I know that he's fine, he's healthy, but every time he gets sick, I'm like, he can't get sick. Right. What do I do? What else can I do? And then you kind of realize that it's not in your hands. You have no control, right?
Well, and I think that kind of brings you to the big change. Like, what happened? You were stuck for 12 years. How did you get unstuck or start to move forward a little?
So very interesting. In I think it was 2008. February 2008 was that year it started. Where I remember driving home from work and I would call Louis crying and saying, I feel that I'm empty, like I'm missing something. I'm not happy. Right. And he was like, what's wrong? Am I doing something wrong? Is it me? And I go, no, it has nothing to do with you, right? And I always knew that God existed, right? I always knew God existed. I prayed to God. I just didn't know, what I know now. And in February 2008, I met a young pastor. His name was Pastor JJ. And I met him through some cousins of mine who were going through some issues. And they said, why don't you come they did like a house of peace, like a home group. Yeah. And I went, and it was radical, Latashia. He says, tell me about you, right? And I'm like, here. And he goes, what are your struggles? What do you feel? He was very, it was easy to trust him and talk to him. And that night I went home, I told Louis, I think I'm a Christian now. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And Louis had grown up He went to evangelical school. He was always a Christian, right? But he never imposed it on me when we got married because I was a Catholic, right? Or, I thought I was a Catholic. And I came home and I took everything that belonged to the Catholic religion and I put it in bags and I told him, can you take this? I told the pastor, can you take this with you? And something just started happening. I don't know what started happening, but something happened in my life that day, right? And then I lose my job. Like a month later, in March, I lose my job.
There was a little bit of hope, and then it's like, okay, now we're.
And then I'm like, wait a minute, I just accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. Now I don't have a job.
Right.
But 3 days later, I get a job off. I get they call me for an interview for a job, and I get an interview with the lady. And a couple of days later, she's like, we want you to come to our office. And their office was in Tampa, in St. Petersburg. And my phobia for 12 years was I could not see or ride planes. Go figure, right? And she says, we're going to fly you to Tampa in the morning. You'll fly back in the afternoon. And I'm like, what do you mean you're flying me there? And I'm like, what do I say? And I remember going to Lewis and I go, can you drive me there? And he's like, you're going to fly there and you're going to go and you're going to come back.
Right, because Florida's not a small state, right? And you're in the south part.
It would be 45 minutes on an airplane to Tampa, 4 or 5 hours in the car. Right. And I said, okay, but you're going to take me to the airport? No, I'm not. And I was mad. Right. I'm like, how can you be so inconsiderate? Don't you recognize my feelings? And I remember that day I said, fine, I'm going to go. And I look it up and it's a propeller plane. Tiny plane, 16 passengers. And I'm like, okay. So I took my Bible and I said, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to do it. And I did it.
Right.
And how many trips have I taken since? And I'm going to tell you, I always tell my kids, and when I come back, I usually tell the church, the closest I feel to God is when I'm in a plane. The more He speaks to me, the more I can write down. And that's where my transformation started. It doesn't just go away. Right. You still deal with it, but there was just a sense of, I'm going to be okay.
Right. He gave you that peace.
Amazing. Right. Amazing. And the phobia went away. The panics went away. And then the anxiety started going away. And yes, you get one. Look, the enemy is repetitive. He's not that smart. He's smart, but not that smart. So he never uses anything new in your life. He's going to use your weaknesses.
Right. I was going to say, he knows your weakness.
He knows your weakness.
Where he's going to keep pressing you.
And there's where we need to remember God's promises to us, right? That He says, be anxious about nothing, right? And everything in thanksgiving and prayer. And that's the thing that I started repeating over my life, that He's got my back. There's no reason for me to be anxious. There's no reason for me to worry. He's in control. And that's where my healing started. But it took 12 years and of losing hope, of like, this is my life. This is what I'm going to deal with for the rest of my life. The constant, your heart's beating at 100 miles per hour constantly. You're in meetings and you just want to scream and get out. You're in front of people and you're like, I'm going to pass out in front of somebody. It's embarrassing. It doesn't happen because with anxiety, you get all these things, but they don't happen. Right. And believe it or not, when you're going through anxiety, you're more in control than you think of yourself, right? But then that started and it was the best decision in my entire life. What pills and doctors couldn't do, God did to me in a matter of a night. Nothing, in a matter of, you got to get on a plane tomorrow.
Well, and I think it's interesting, like you said, you shared with Lewis, like, something's missing. Yeah. And that was God. Yeah. He always talks, when he preaches, he always talks about the puzzle, that our heart's a puzzle and there's a missing piece and nobody can ever replace that piece. And that piece is Jesus. Absolutely. And that's the piece that I was missing. And that's the piece of the puzzle that my heart was missing. Yeah. And it doesn't make us perfect, but it locks something in, right? That's it. It's the complete, that's when your puzzle, and then that's when you can start becoming who God created you to be. So that missing piece is what allows you to start walking in your purpose. And I deal with it. Do I deal with the same level of anxiety now? Absolutely not. Does it try to come back? COVID was, it was testing for me. I went through it. There were nights where I was like, am I going to die? Right. Am I going to wake up tomorrow? My symptoms are going to be worse.
the horror stories, and I would always go back to be worried about nothing,
Right.
be anxious
Well, I
about
think
nothing.
as you said, like saying to them, like this is God's promise.
Yeah,
And that's how we're to fight the battles.
that's it.
And we're kind of sharing that with our kids right now at church, the armor of God, and you're going to tell me a lie? Okay, I'm going to tell you a promise. Like, we're going to fight that word for word. And I think that's a great verse that you have.
It's every time worry tries to come, it's be anxious about nothing. And the armor of God, the way that I use it for myself is he did not give me anything to cover my back, because he doesn't want you to turn back.
Come back. Oh, that's
He
awesome.
wants you to move forward, right?
Yep.
So he gives you everything to cover the front. You got to face it. You got to move forward, right?
Right. It's not going to be easy.
It's not going to be, right. There's going to be tough days, but he doesn't give you anything to cover your back. And the other verse that I constantly use and I share with anybody that calls me when they have a situation or an anxiety or a problem is, no weapon formed against you will prosper, right? It doesn't say that no weapons are going to be formed. It says it's not going to prosper against you. So when the anxiety tries to, when it's formed against me, I tell them you're not going to prosper. Like you can't, right? Yeah. So those are, the word was created. It's God speaking to us.
Absolutely.
And you take it and then you speak to yourself about it, right?
Right. You got to remind yourself.
You have to. Which is one thing that I do in my house is constant reminders.
I know, yeah.
And that's something that I did when I started, is making sure that I had a constant reminder of God's word everywhere I go. So if you go to my bedroom, if you go to it's a constant reminder, because that's what actually keeps us safe, right?
Yeah.
That's, at least that to me, that's what keeps me safe. It's a constant reminder of God's promises.
And I think that's a great idea. Like, I think in my bedroom, I have my word of the year. Last year that was joy, and as soon as I wake up, I see it. It says choose joy.
That's right.
So it's that constant reminder of his promises or his love, that he brings us in that. So what advice would you give others that maybe they're in that 12-year period of suffering silently, feeling something's missing? What advice would you give people?
So talk about it. You have to find someone that it's not going to judge you, right? And I'm going to go somewhere with that. So it doesn't judge you. They're not going to talk about it with somebody else. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. It's, I tell the church all the time, I'm probably not your typical Christian or minister or whatever they want to call me, right? Because I always speak from the heart. Like, I go to God and I'm bare. I'm like, I am a hot mess. How do you even use me, right? It's talking to Jesus about it. You know what? Not that I don't believe in psychologists or psychiatrists, I do, but find someone who has Christian principles. Right. Because what I learned through my experience is that going to someone that didn't know Christ, what they do is feed you medication and feed you what science says. When you find somebody that knows Christ, they'll say, yes, there's an issue, right? You have an issue, but here's where you find comfort, right? And I found comfort. I mean, I went through, this was not just anxiety, it's panic, phobias, and it was learning. It was continuous, reading God's promises. Matthew 6, right? Matthew 6, I think it starts 25 to 34. Says, why are you going to worry about it? Right. Even if you add, you're not going to grow, and look at the birds and look at this, and then it says,
if I see the bird, I'm going to take care of you.
Exactly, and it says, seek the kingdom of God first, right, and everything else, right? So that's my recommendation is seek the kingdom of God. Seek God. Jesus is there. He's not going to leave us. He's always available. Right. He's not going to talk bad about you. He's not going to judge you. But it's and you can find a minister or a pastor or somebody that has either gone through it or that can help you find the answers, right, to it. But my experience of 12 years taking medication, spending a lot of money, I spent a lot of money on this. I was completely full and found my healing in God's word.
Okay. So what about, if somebody has somebody in their life that's suffering? What advice would you give for them for that anxiety that you can't see? Like, being a person that suffered with anxiety, how do you help somebody through that, with that?
Pray for them, be patient, and understand that it's like dealing with anything else. So whether it's depression or anxiety or panic, it's like high blood pressure, diabetes, right? Arthritis. They're dealing with something in their life,
Right.
and it's being understanding about that. That I don't know what you're feeling, but I'm here for you.
Right.
And sometimes people just need somebody to listen. And not judge them. Sometimes I didn't need anybody to tell me anything. I knew that it was something weird. I knew all those things. I read. I bought, I don't know how many self-help books, getting rid of anxiety. I get it, but I feel it.
Right.
So
Doesn't
all
take it
you
away.
need, right? All you need is somebody that just listen to that person, be there for them, give them a hug once in a while. Well, we can't hug now, but
Right.
but just let people know I'm thinking about you. I get it. It's going to be better encouraging that person to keep going, right? Because I've met people that it's been so bad that they don't leave their homes, right? And that's not where you want to, you don't want that person to get there. So it's being understanding and just listening, right? Encouraging, sending them, hey, it's going to be fine. God's got it. God's got your back. I'm praying for you. Those things, believe it or not, they make a difference.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, like, I know my mom, she didn't suffer with anxiety, but depression. And those are things that you don't see.
Don't see it.
And for me, I was always like, I don't understand. Why don't you just be happy today? Or why don't you, just get up and go do something? But it's truly a struggle.
It is
with that.
I think that God has erased some of those memories. I remember being in class one night, and then I'm like, oh my God, how embarrassing, right? So I'm in class one night. I used to go to school like 6 to 10 on Tuesdays, and Louis was working late. And I would, again, structure. I would call him at 6 o'clock. Hey, I'm in class. He would answer, okay, I'm heading home. I said, can you text me when you get home? And so I call him at 6, he doesn't answer. I call him at 6:10, he doesn't answer. I call him at 6:15, he doesn't answer. Latasha, I imagine Louis, he used to work for this company that had silos. I imagine him drowned in a silo. My mind I can hear the professor, but I start hearing him super far away. There's like 30 people in the classroom. People are presenting. I'm like losing my mind. I picked up my stuff and I walked right across the classroom in front of the professor teaching and just left the class.
Right.
Because I thought I was going to pass out. Can't get a hold of Louis. Call his boss. I can't get a hold of him. Is he okay? He's like, I just left. He should be fine. And I was going to drive to his job.
Right.
And then I get a call and then it all goes away.
Just like that.
It just goes away. And can't live like that.
No.
You can't live like that. So if you know somebody that's struggling with that, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
They're not making it up. You're not being extra, like some people call it, right? Some kids say, oh, you're being extra. It's a real struggle and people need help.
Right.
And to me, and I share what happened to me. To me, what helped me the most was that I can just pick this up, right? I don't need a refill. I can just pick it up. I don't need, just pick it up and constantly remind myself that anxiety is the opposite of faith. And God says that we have to have faith and believe in what we don't see. So every time I start feeling anxious, I know I believe in God. I know what He's done in my life. I have to have faith, and that's how I kind of talk to myself.
Well, I thank you for sharing your story. I love the piece about the missing puzzle piece. That'll kind of stick with me.
Yeah.
So I know this is kind of a hard story to share, but we definitely appreciate it. I know it's going to bless someone.
I hope so.
And if you are someone that deals with anxiety or somebody in your family that deals with anxiety, we'd love to be in prayer for you. You can connect with us on our website at findingthemore.org. You can find all of our avenues there. And until next time, keep moving forward.